Okay, I'm sorry. I think the last time I spoke, there was some problem over on this side of the room because I was wearing a lavalier mic, and when I turned my head, they couldn't hear me. I do apologize for that. Now, are you here for this talk, or is this early seating for the Super Bowl? Let's see, the Colts. This is the Colts side, right? Colts. And this is the Saints side, right? Oh, well, you got to change. Switch now, and then you won't have to worry about it. You can have it done for then. Okay, thank you so much for coming. This is my third and last talk because I had a 12-day assignment, and Debbie and I are heading home from Puerto Montt tomorrow. So with great sadness, I leave you because we've made many friends, and with great sadness, I leave you because you are going to Antarctica, and I have never been there. And I have been on the other end of your run, but not that part, and I would give a lot to go to Antarctica with you. But unfortunately, that's not in the cards. Perhaps some other trip in the near future. It's also hard. There's just so much happening in this part of the world. It's also hard to pick out the stories that I might tell you in some of these talks because there are so many good ones. And so we went through the Incas and Spanish settlement. We went through the Nobel Prize, went through Robinson Crusoe. Those were my earlier talks. And on this one, I selected two things, two stories to send me off. And one of them happened fairly recently, 1972. And the other one happened a long time ago, 1832. So they're quite different. So let me share with you two very powerful stories of things that have happened here in this part of the world. And my story begins on Friday the 13th of October, 1972, when a Uruguayan rugby team from Montevideo, Uruguay, called the Old Christians of Stella Maris College. Now, the Old Christians was their nickname, like I'm from San Francisco, like the San Francisco 49ers or the New York Mets. So they were called the Old Christians. And this was a Catholic college in a Catholic country. That's going to come up here shortly. So they were flying over the Andes on Friday the 13th of October, 1972, on their way to Santiago to play a match, an exhibition match, against a top-notch team from that city. So for about $1,500, they chartered a Fairchild turboprop airplane from, of all people, the Uruguayan Air Force, which made it a military plane, which comes up a little later in the story, and it became known as Flight 571. 45 people were on board. There was a crew of 5 and then 40 others. It was the team, the coaches, and some of their friends and family. They wanted to go over, play the match, and then spend some holiday time in Santiago. So the flight actually began the day before, on Thursday, October 12th. And shortly after they left Montevideo, the pilots received word that there was bad weather over the Andes. They were advised to set down in Mendoza, Argentina, on the eastern edge of the Andes. And everyone enjoyed Mendoza, pretty city, photogenic, lots of nice shops and restaurants and bars, things that would be of interest to a young crowd. And as they got into the city, they broke into different clusters and walked around town, bumping into each other, enjoying the visit. And the rugby team, macho guys, of course, would bump into the pilots, and they would get on their case, like, come on, hey, what's a little bad weather? Let's go, let's get over there and beat these guys. We have to play this match. That evening, October 12th, some of the group went to a movie. They saw What's Up, Doc? With Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal. Some of the guys found some Argentinian girls on a holiday, took them dancing, and they didn't get back to the hotel until 4 in the morning. They overnighted in Mendoza, as we overnighted in Atlanta on the way here, unexpectedly. The next morning, Friday the 13th, the pilots had to make a go, no-go decision, and here is where the military plane comes in. Argentina had a policy that an aircraft from a foreign power could stay in the country no longer than 24 hours. This was a military plane, even though there were no military personnel on board. So they had to leave Argentina. So the pilots went to the airport early, and they were checking weather, and they were also talking to pilots who had just flown in over the same route. The weather was still not good. It had improved a little, but just a little. And it was crunch time. Do they go back to Montevideo and cancel the match? Or do they go over the Andes and to Santiago? What's a little bad weather? It's only about an hour and a half flight in a prop plane, much shorter than that in a jet. Santiago was almost due west of Mendoza, but the flight path was not in a straight line, and that's because some of the tallest mountains in the Andes, 22,000 feet plus, are in between Mendoza and Santiago. So in a turboprop, flight plans called for the planes to first fly south, then come through a pass at about the Argentinian-Chilean border, and then south through the border, and then turn to the right and head north to go into Santiago. So that was the normal flight path. Usually there were tailwinds, but the winds had shifted and there were now headwinds. The flight plans anticipated tailwinds, and they did all their checkpoints in anticipation of the usual tailwinds. At a certain time, you'd be at a certain point. Certain time, you'd be at a certain point. They left Mendoza at 2:18 in the afternoon for a 90-minute flight to Santiago. The pilots believed they had reached the pass and were now on the Chilean side of the border. They radioed the Santiago tower and told them that, what their position was, what they thought their position was. And clouds and turbulence and strong headwinds had slowed their course, and they had not yet reached the pass. As they turned to the right, shortly after they turned to the right, one wing hit a peak and broke off. Shortly after, the other wing was broken off as they hit another peak. It swung back and it ripped off the tail of the plane, the back part of the fuselage. The fuselage was now flying on its own. Finally, it skidded across a glacier and was stopped by a snowbank sitting at about 11,500 feet still in Argentina. Of the 45 people on the plane, 12 would die immediately, 5 would die the next morning. Among the survivors, there were serious head injuries, things like head trauma. There were also things like broken arms and legs. There was one guy who had a steel rod in his stomach, and he still got up and helped. He died a day or so later. And more would die as the days passed. There were 2 first-year medical students on board, but first-year medical students don't know a lot about medicine. And in fact, they were pretty heavily loaded in their first year, they later said, on psychology rather than medicine. They got up and went into the cockpit. The pilot was killed instantly, crushed up against the instrument panel. The co-pilot was alive, but barely. He told them that he had radioed their position before they crashed, the position being they thought they were on the Chilean side. They were not. The plane radio was not working now. They tried to get it working, but it was not working.